This is Fothentic History.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Brian Young.
And here on Earth, Brian, we're headed into the holiday season for many people. Not everyone celebrates the same seasons or the same holidays, but for a lot of people right now, probably a lot of our listeners, it's that time. But as long as there have been sentient beings, it seems they have found a way to celebrate and mark the passage of time with special holidays.
Yeah, so some holidays were really straightforward in their origin and meaning, but others have a deeper and sometimes sinister history. So today, we'll first talk briefly about a few that fall into the first category, and then we'll delve into a couple that have more lore and apocrypha around their connotations to sort through. So some were celebrated on only one planet, while others spanned the galaxy.
So the first one we'll talk about was a Hosnian Prime holiday, and up until its destruction by the First Order's Starkiller base, Hosnian Prime celebrated a holiday called Equinox Day, and this acknowledged the start of the planet's fall season. And the planet's capital was the site of a traditional race that ran along the river that cut through the capital, and contestants would compete in sun sails, so these were solar-powered vehicles that hovered just over the water's surface, and for onlookers, festivities were enjoyed all along the banks of the river throughout the course. And as the sun began to go down, the races could really get very interesting because the loss of light meant that the sun sails could dip towards and sometimes even into the water.
It's no surprise that someone as vainglorious as Emperor Sheev Palpatine would declare a mandatory galactic holiday in his own honor, and that's how Empire Day was founded. It marked the day that Palpatine declared himself emperor and was celebrated every year following the year that he did so, until the end of his reign.
And all planets that had an imperial presence were required to celebrate. So all citizens on those planets were mandated to celebrate as well. Although forcing people to participate in a holiday hardly fosters festive feelings, each occupied planet would stage a parade, and they would watch a replay of the speech that was made by the Emperor the day the Republic became a galactic empire. And the Imperial Anthem was also played.
In an interesting twist, three figures who would figure prominently in the rebellion against the Empire were all born on or near the date of the founding of Empire Day. Ezra Bridger, who became a member of Phoenix Squadron under Harrison Dula, was born that day. Luke and Leia Skywalker, the twins who were separated at birth but eventually reunited and crippled the Empire, were born just 2 days later. It was almost as if the Force was trying to equalize the balance of good and evil on that fateful day.
Yeah, it is really interesting that so many important people kind of cluster around there in terms of their birth. But moving on Naboo, the Festival of Light was a holiday that marked the anniversary of Naboo becoming part of the Galactic Republic. And as Naboo is known, we've talked about it before, to have been a planet with a flourishing art culture and an appreciation for beauty, it is no surprise that this particular holiday included a lavish and beautiful celebration, including really incredibly advanced fireworks displays that featured like these detailed display images, including like words and letters and imagery that was almost photographic in its detail.
So that was definitely an interesting festival. And wasn't there an attempt on Palpatine's life at that festival at one point?
There was. So it kind of, got this secondary, not meaning, but a secondary attachment of association with it.
That interesting history. So we've talked on the show previously about the Boonta Eve Classic, which was a famed pod race that takes place on Tatooine tied to the Boonta Eve holiday. And during that episode, we detailed the race held by the Hutt clan and staged in Mos Espa's Grand Arena, but we didn't really delve into the holiday known as Boonta Eve.
And the origin of this holiday is entirely related to Hutt culture. So it commemorates the day that the Hutt Boonta Hastilic Shadru ascended and became a god. And as is often the case with root stories of holidays, Boonta's transcendence is known through a mixture of only barely verifiable information and a lot of hazy folklore.
So it's worth noting as we dig into this that because it is a Hutt holiday, elements of it are really unsavory and even reprehensible, specifically slavery, so that's just a heads up there.
Yeah, it does appear that Bunta Histilic Shadru was probably a real figure in historical Hut hierarchy. But beyond that, much of his story and the beginnings of Bunta Eve comes from legends. So know as we go that we're not working from primary sources here, but as I mentioned just a moment ago, really we're working from folklore.
So Bunta Histilic Shadru was the head of the colony of Huts that lived on the planet Kovari more than 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. Kovari was invaded by humans from the Outer Rim star cluster known as the Tyon Cluster.
And that invasion force was led by Zim the Despot. And Zim, who hailed from Argai, was well known and feared for his brutality, as the word despot in his name implies. His father had been a pirate king who had taken world after world in the Tyon Cluster. And in 25,130, before the Battle of Yavin, Zim succeeded his father as ruler of the Tyon Cluster territories.
Zim, like his father, expanded the reach of his rule by conquering worlds, and eventually he set his sights on Bunta Histilic Shadru's planet Kovari. And as the story goes, once Zim learned of the Huts, he was rather fascinated by them, but early contact between the two civilizations did not go well. The Huts pushed Zim over the edge when they suggested that his people would make great slaves. In Zim the Despot's mind, the only possible response to such an insult was war.
And early conflicts in this war were really indecisive. One side would gain ground in a win, only to lose it shortly thereafter. And it was during this time that Bunta really made a name for himself by sending suicide attacks comprised of slave warriors to wear down Zim's forces to buy time for his fellow Huts.
Clan General Cossack the Hutt decided to challenge Zim to fight in ritual combat, taunting the Tianese despot with claims that only cowards would refuse such a challenge and choose instead to resort to sneak attacks in the ongoing war. The site chosen by Cossack in his challenge was Vontor, a planet in Hutt space that was part of the Cyclada cluster.
Zim accepted this challenge, and the result was the 3 battles of Vontor. And the first battle went terribly for the Tynese forces led by Zim. Their entire navy was destroyed. And the second battle decimated Zim's ground forces. And in the meantime, the Huts were engaging privateers of their own to damage Zim's supply line, and Bunta was in charge of this privateering subterfuge.
But the inspiration for the Bunta Eve holidays tied to the third Battle of Vontor. Leading up to the battle, the Huts had been preparing a surprise for Zim and his forces, a massive surprise. The Huts had been negotiating with allies to fortify their numbers. Weequay, Vodron, Nikto, and Clatunian forces joined with the Huts as allies, a move that Zim did not see coming.
So according to Hut lore, the night before this third Battle of Vontor, Bunta gave a rousing speech to an assemblage of his supporters and slaves, in which he said that death was far better than being governed by humans.
Zim the Despot was indeed taken by surprise with the allied forces the Huts had assembled, and because of the supply line choking that Bunta Histilic Shadru had overseen, the Tynese forces were not as well equipped as they should have been.
So, unsurprisingly, Zim was defeated, and he was captured and enslaved, and according to the Hut version of events, he eventually died in Cossack's dungeons. The Tynese folklore on this matter tells a different story, however, of Zim being murdered at Vontor. Bunta was recognized as a vital figure in the Huts' victory, and according to legend, as we mentioned earlier, he ascended to godhood.
To celebrate the battle's anniversary, the Huts began a tradition where their slaves would promise to continue to obey their masters in exchange for food and gifts. Initially, this practice began on Kovari, which was renamed for Bunta, but eventually it spread to other worlds as well, all run by Huts, most notably Arami and the aforementioned Tatooine.
And one of the common aspects of all of these celebrations across this spectrum of locations was racing of one form or another. Unfortunately, as exciting, for example, as the Bunta Eve Classic was, it was actually, according to legend, harkening back to the treatment of the Tynese humans that had been defeated by the Huts at Vontor, and the way they were treated after the conflict had ended.
Per Hut oral histories, the prisoners of war were forced to run foot races, and the Huts would place bets on the runners as a form of entertainment. And there were several rounds of races. The winners, if you can call prisoners forced to compete winners in any way, would advance to the next round, and the losers were executed.
Yeah, the end result was that there could only be one winner, so only one person survived all of this torture. And that is how games of speed became the focus of Bunta Eve celebrations. Not really a holiday I'm so excited about anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, there's definitely some positive connotation there now where you have someone like a slave like Anakin Skywalker beating it and being able to earn his slavery or his freedom out of slavery from the race. So kind of ironic. But I'm sure that the Hutts probably wouldn't be happy about that if they realized how their holiday was being perverted for something good.
Yeah.
So, of course, one of the most famous holidays in the galaxy, the one with a lot of lore around it, is Life Day.
And what we know for certain about Life Day is actually a pretty small amount, given how widely discussed this particular holiday is. But to some degree, it's because Life Day is so often talked about that we have such a hazy and confusing notion about it in many regards. So, for example, play a game of telephone and you will quickly see how easy it is for information to become distorted. So, as various non-Wookiee people have talked about Life Day over the millennia, historians have really lost the ability to track many of the details about it to primary sources.
And the reason that so many of the galaxy's various species who have never been to the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk know about Life Day is because even far from home, many Wookiees continued to celebrate it.
There are certain aspects of Life Day are these. It was a celebration of life, harmony, and family. And in its origins on Kashyyyk, it's centered around the massive tree of life. As Wookiees were an arboreal species, it makes sense that the icon that represented their celebration was a tree.
The origin point of Life Day on the galactic timeline is unknown, but it's believed to have begun as far back as 1.5 million years before the Battle of Yavin. Historians specializing in Wookiee culture have long posited, based on available evidence, that this celebration initially took place once every 3 years, but at some point along the way it came to be celebrated as an annual tradition.
As holidays go, Life Day had many of the hallmarks of any of our Earth celebrations. Singing and music were included in the festivities, as were special foods and treats. Fireworks and tree-themed decor allegedly were also included in all of the celebration rituals, and on occasion gifts were believed to have been traded, but the real focus was on honoring family and community connections, both through remembering lost members and also in reaffirming and strengthening the bonds with the living. And in addition to honoring their fellow Wookiees, celebrants also honored their homeworld and the many forms of life that it supported.
In a spirit journey aspect of the holiday that's less in line with many of the holidays listeners may be familiar with, Wookiees would also chew on a root that was common to their ceremonies, the Orga root. And Wookiees believed the Orga plant, which was viney and had a number of violent natural protections against attack or harm, was sentient, and chewing it enabled them to travel to the Tree of Life in spirit form. Incidentally, Wookiee lore suggests that the Orga plant gave its own roots up as they had new growth so that the Kashyyyk natives could achieve the spiritual transcendence needed to make the journey.
Yeah, we don't really do that so much with our holidays on Earth, but it's interesting.
I'd give it a try.
Also, according to oral histories, Wookiees would also pledge life debts to one another, commonly in a group of individuals that made up a Wookiee family, and that family is both biological and chosen. And while the focus of the day was generally joy, the seriousness of the commitments that Wookiees made to one another at this time is not to be discounted. The traditional meal of the day is said to have often been preceded by a moment of silence, during which Wookiees reflected on their closest relationships and their devotion to friends and family.
The Galactic Civil War was especially rough on the Wookiee homeworld. Due to the Empire's slavery practices, many Wookiees were forcibly taken far away from Kashyyyk, and this, plus the handful who left home to travel the galaxy for other reasons, led to the widespread knowledge of the holiday. While some Wookiees tried to travel home to celebrate each year, many simply didn't have that option and would enact their own celebrations, following their traditions as best they could wherever they were.
And there had been Wookiees traveling the galaxy before the Galactic Civil War, and other cultures learned of Life Day in this way. But it was during the war that knowledge of it really expanded exponentially. Due to the strife that Wookiees found themselves in during that time, the holiday became even more deeply important and meaningful, as they knew all too well the fragility and darkness that life could hold, but they still chose to focus on the hope and renewal of their home planet.
There's an apocryphal story that Life Day was even celebrated on Coruscant by some people, and at least once, the Jedi Temple held a Life Day celebration complete with a representation of the Tree of Life and festive decor throughout the temple. As the story goes, there was a skirmish between Separatist and Republic forces when the cyborg General Grievous attempted to steal some of the gifts that were intended to be part of the celebration. Fortunately, the Republic clone troopers on hand were able to easily dispatch the would-be party crashers.
After the defeat of Imperial forces with the destruction of the first Death Star, a renewed sense of hope in the galaxy led many planets, including Naboo and Corellia, to adopt the Life Day tradition. And this led to conflict on occasion, as the Emperor allegedly hated Life Day, and Imperial troops on some planets were ordered to destroy Life Day decorations, claiming that they were a front for Rebel Alliance operatives smuggling contraband. But Life Day celebrations continued just the same.
There are even rumors of people here in this galaxy and time celebrating Life Day. Occasionally on social media, you might see people wishing each other a happy Life Day, though how rooted in the original tradition those greetings are is very hard to tell.
Yeah, we don't really know. Not a lot of people are super upfront about whether or not they are having a Tree of Life celebration of their own, how they're celebrating Life Day, but I think the spirit of it is lovely, and I like that people are sharing it in new ways.
Yeah. We've sort of supplanted one of the major holidays in my home to Life Day, and it's centered around family and commitment and things like that. Not so much a specific Tree of Life, but
Yeah, I mean, I really love that aspect of it. The idea that Wookiees would commit themselves to one another and make very clear like the depth of their love for one another and how far they were willing to go to support each other is really, really something I think everybody could benefit from.
Yeah, definitely.
So whether you celebrate Life Day or the standard Earth holidays, or you celebrate completely different holidays of your own that you've made up or adopted from somewhere else, we hope they're lovely.
Indeed.
And so, do you have any listener mail this time around?
I do. So we've got a message from a person who asks to be known as Brockness, and their message is labeled classified, but that we could read it on the show, which is a bit of a conundrum.
It is. I hope we're worthy and we don't get anybody in trouble.
So, hello, Brian and Holly, the letter goes. Your coverage of K-Day and the battle against the kaiju brought back many memories, both exciting and tragic, but it inspired me to write in and recant an untold tale of this magnificent and devastating struggle. Just sharing this is putting my life in danger as the government worked tirelessly to cover up this sequence of events, but I never signed any of their NDAs, so if any of the suits are reading this, they can go suck an egg. He's very excited about this.
He's brazen.
Yeah. After I saw the coverage of the first kaiju attack on the news, I began work on my own Jaeger project, which I called Tenebris Equis, aka Dark Knight. My Jaeger, unlike those developed in the mainstream, had a cloaking device, which was much more compact and most importantly could be manned solo due to my creation of an AI that was able to interface with you and share the strain of the drift. Although when a friend took this mech to fight with my knowledge, I realized that my AI had to be calibrated specifically for each human brain. My friend was able to defeat a level 3 kaiju on his first and only combat experience, but it took his life as he had to take on all the strain of the drift. I took down a number of kaiju, all of them not reported or attributed to another Jaeger team in order to hide my actions, but I believe one I took out was a Category 5. I called it Mohosuru, as it had the ability to mimic the behavior of my Jaeger. I nearly died in this fight. My mech was destroyed almost beyond compare. I wish this is where the fight ended, but after that breach was closed, everyone thought it was over, but I think anyone who actually fought this beast knew they wouldn't give up so easily. I appreciate your coverage of these events, as traumatic as recalling this time in my life was. Such wars and battles need to be remembered, as many gave their lives in the fight against these devastatingly magnificent beasts. Sorry for the lengthy letter. I felt my story needed to be known. Regards, Brockness. So
Brockness, first, thank you for your service.
yeah, very much so.
Second, I think this happens a lot, right? There are a lot of ways that people are doing things, and because it's outside of the government scope, we're not always getting those stories.
Yeah, very much so. So I'm glad we could help shine a light on this one, and hope no one gets in trouble for it.
Indeed.
So, Holly, where can people find you?
I'm at Surliest Girl on Twitter, and on Instagram is SurlyGirly5, and I am at Stuff You Missed in History Class, which is my day job podcast, and that is at missedinhistory.com, which you can pass through to all of our social media, which is Missed in History everywhere. And I also do a fun Star Wars show with you called Full of Sith.
Yeah, Full of Sith. You can find it on social media at Full of Sith or fullofsith.com, and we talk about events in a galaxy far, far away, and it's really fun. If you want to find me on any other platforms, you can just look me up on Twitter at Swankmatron, and that'll direct you in the right direction toward anything else, whether that's my Patreon or workonstarwars.com or wherever else. As far as Fothentic History, we love hearing your letters. We love receiving them. If you want to go to fothentichistory.com and use the contact form, those letters will get directly to Holly and I. You can look at all of our backlog of episodes there, and you can find us on Twitter at Fothentics, and you can look us up on Facebook. We've got a Facebook page there, and I think that about does it for us. If you'd like to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you listen to the show, we'd greatly appreciate that. Is there anything I'm missing, Holly?
I think you covered it expertly.
So is there anything else you've got then?
Nope, we're good.
Well,
other than wishing everyone happy holidays.
Yeah, until next time, happy holidays indeed.